major counterfactuals, but regardless of the presence of US bases or not, Iran's goal is to cause chaos. It's not just to target those bases.
Let's talk about the negotiations. Obviously, they're not happening. The reality is that President Trump said that he was invited to talk and he was happy to talk. At least that's what he told The Atlantic. The Iranians are telling a very different story, that they're not interested in negotiations at this stage. I wonder, given the fact that we already had negotiations, the Iranians got hit anyways, the last two times, this time around and last year as well, kind of a similar pattern playing out. I wonder what the lesson is for Iran here. I mean, I wonder if the US may end up with a worse deal because Iran may say, look, there's really no way we can give up on our ballistic missiles because you guys are going to attack us no matter in how much good faith we're negotiating.
Absolutely. Actually, it takes us a bit of a step back behind the intentions or even the rationale that led to the decision by both the United States and Israel. And we have to remind ourselves, it's most probably Tel Aviv convincing Washington that this war is necessary for the long-term stability, economic and security stability of the region and the rest of the world. But if we were to look at the rationale behind the attack from the first place, we would notice that it may be one of the two main reasons is that the US and Israel were hoping that such an attack may have instigated an opposition that would appear and emerge, that would further pressure the current regime, that would eventually lead to a potential regime change, despite all the security analyses that goes against the idea of an airstrike being enough without a land invasion. But the other side of the story would be that the US and Israel were hoping that they would pressure Iran even further during the negotiations to accept some of the conditions that were put on the table. So most definitely, the negotiations in the future will be much more harder to convince the Iranian side.
I mean, do you see any way that there could be regime change without some kind of a civil war in Iran? And I mean, I guess a more basic question is there any opposition elements inside Iran that may be armed in any way to be able to even fight a civil war were that to be the case?
Well, it has happened before in the past. We noticed the US-led Desert Storm operation in Iraq in 1991, which led to 14 out of 18 provinces falling outside the scope or the control of the former regime of Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein's regime was only able to eliminate it with the support later on of the US and UK Air Force. We noticed similar examples across the Arab Spring, some that failed and some that succeeded. But in Iran's case, that is definitely a great example that you mentioned, Scott, is that the opposition isn't armed, whereas other components and interest groups that are affiliated with the regime are armed. But it also depends on the people within those different components that are relevant to the regime. Will they be convinced that it is worth fighting the long-term fight if they notice that there is a large portion of the population willing to take down the regime?
Yeah, let's see. All right, Zaydoun El-Kinani, Rob Geist Pinfold for us there in London. Thank you both. If you are just joining us, here's a reminder of the latest developments in the joint Israeli-US attacks on Iran. In the past few hours, Iran has launched strikes on several US allies in the region, including Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain. Saudi oil company Aramco says one of its facilities has been hit in a strike. The Ras Tanura refinery has been shut as a precautionary measure. It's one of the biggest plants in the world, producing more than 500,000 barrels of crude oil per day. Several U.S. planes have crashed in Kuwait, that is according to the Defense Ministry. The crews are safe. Kuwait says it's investigating the cause of the incident. The port city of Ras Al Khaimah in the United Arab Emirates has also come under attack. An explosion and plumes of smoke can be seen near residential buildings. All right, Mohammed Val is standing by for us in Tehran, but first let's go to Zain Basravi in Doha. Zain Basravi is with us in Doha. So, Zain, what do we know about this strike on the United Arab Emirates and the other strikes across the Gulf region?
What we understand is that today, much like the last 2 days, the first 2 days of the conflict, the third day has gone much the same. Any attacks that happened on Iran, any attacks carried out by the US and Israel, Iran retaliates. It doesn't retaliate just against Israel, not just against U.S. warships or U.S. planes. It is hitting what it considers to be U.S. allies, U.S. assets in the region, and hitting more and more civilian infrastructure and other targets in the GCC. In the last few minutes, in the last hour, we've gotten information that 2 projectiles hit a ship in Bahrain's port. The crew was evacuated. An oil tanker off the coast of Oman was attacked by a drone boat, and 1 person was killed in the targeting of an oil tanker off the coast of Oman. Debris was interested. There was also falling debris on an oil refinery in Kuwait that caused some damage there. So these ongoing attacks over and over again really reflect the fact that Iran is not letting up. If it will come under pressure, it will make sure that the United States and its allies are placed under proportionate pressure, if not equal pressure.
All right, let's go over to Mohammed Val, who is with us in Tehran, if we have him. So, Mohammed, look, Zain has been telling us about the strikes in the Gulf region. I wonder if we have any comment from the Iranian side as to what exactly they are going after, what exactly the broader strategy here might be.
Yes, Scott, the only line we have, and it has been repeated over and over again by the Iranian authorities, is that they are targeting places and locations from which attacks were launched on Iran or are being launched on Iran. So they are talking about US bases and also any other facilities that are helping US bases and US armies in the region. They haven't been specific about why there is, for instance, an attack on a certain location in Dubai or a certain location in Doha, but specifically they are reiterating the fact that anywhere from which an attack is launched on Iran is going to be a legitimate target for Iran, for the Iranian army. And they are talking about an increase in the intensity of the reactions day by day, promising the enemy, as they say, that every new day in this war will be tougher and more costly to them than the previous one. They have just talked about launching a ballistic hypersonic new missile called Khaybar, which has been revealed only 2023, but it has been used now for the first time in this war. And that's like a confirmation of what they have been promising, that every time this war develops into more intense phases, Iran will show that it has the capability to accompany that with due force.
Yeah, and we're keeping an eye, obviously, on what other targets may be hit from the Iranian side and what's being hit inside of Iran as well. Mo, sit tight. All right, Iran has told the International Atomic Energy Agency that Israel and the U.S. attacked its nuclear facilities on Sunday. However, IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi says there is no indication any of the sites have been hit. He's warned attacks risk causing radiation releases, which could impact countries beyond the borders of Iran. Grossi also says the agency is still trying to contact Iranian nuclear authorities without response. The UN nuclear watchdog is holding an emergency meeting at the request of Russia. So Iran's ambassador to the IAEA has condemned U.S. attacks on his country. Reza Najafi says it's not part of the peace President Trump promised Iranians. And he has again refuted accusations that Tehran intends to build a nuclear weapon. Listen.
Lies, deception, and misrepresentation has always been a fundamental tool of the U.S. foreign policy. This is what has been called as weapons of mass deception of the U.S. Historically, they used deception and disinformation to invade other countries. This war was launched by the U.S. president, who attempts to portray himself as a man of peace and asking for Nobel Peace Prize. Even when they talked about peace, it is a lie. And if they call for diplomacy, it is but deception.
All right, let's go to Bernard Smith in Vienna. Bernard, sorry, there's a lot to clarify here. It's hard to hear that last soundbite. But look, the Americans had said previously that what Iran has in terms of nuclear capabilities was badly degraded last year when it was struck by B-2 bombers. What do we know about these sites that have been targeted inside of Iran, and what more are we hearing from the IAEA?
So Reza Najafi, he's the Iranian representative, the ambassador here at the IAEA, and there you heard him condemning the Israeli and American attacks on Iran, and he said that Natanz was one of the sites that had been targeted. Now it's a sprawling nuclear facility in Iran, and it's got 2 uranium enrichment facilities on it, according to the IAEA. And last June, when Israel attacked Iran last time round, it destroyed an overground nuclear enrichment facility, says the IAEA, and an underground facility was at least badly damaged. So it looks like, according to the Iranians, that the Americans and the Israelis have gone after that enrichment facility at Natanz again. Claim that Natanz has been hit. The problem for the IAEA is they're not on the ground in Iran, and as you mentioned there, they've not been able to get hold of their Iranian counterparts on the ground yet. So the IAEA is in a bit of an information vacuum in terms of what it's able to get off the ground.
Okay. The Kremlin says that Russia is in constant contact with the Iranian leadership after what it described as outright aggression against Tehran. Let's get to Dmitry Medvedenko, who is in Moscow. So, Dmitry, sorry, a lot of moving parts here, but what exactly are the Russians saying? I understand they have some involvement here in these meetings taking place in Vienna with the IAEA. What are their concerns? What are they saying?
Well, regarding the meetings in Vienna, the Russian ambassador to the IAEA and other international organizations said that it is of primary concern what is happening in Iran because, of course, Russia has a nuclear power plant that it operates in Iran, that is the Bushehr plant, and that under no circumstances should it come under attack because that would lead to a radiological hazard for the whole region. Now, when it comes to the statements made by the Kremlin, there was some time that Dmitry Peskov, the spokesman, devoted to the situation in Iran. As you mentioned, he said that Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin are in constant contact with Iran, with other participating countries in this crisis, including the Gulf countries. He said that the Russian president would be having a series of international phone calls throughout the day and that they will report on at least one of them, but won't announce which one it is. And then they made a segue into the topic, of course, of Ukraine, basically saying that the Kremlin is very disappointed in the fact that there was profound diplomacy underway between the United States and Iran through Oman, but it deteriorated into outright aggression from the US and Israel, and that Russia is basically drawing its own conclusions regarding this whole negotiation process, because of course the United States is a prime mediator in the Ukrainian conflict. And so Russia is right now saying, the Kremlin made the following statement, that it only trusts itself and will continue defending its own interests, while of course still welcoming US mediation efforts. So this kind of segue between the topics of Iran and Ukraine.
All right, Dmitry, keep us posted. Meanwhile, the UK says it's working on an operation to support its nationals in the Gulf should they need to evacuate. The British government says more than 300,000 citizens may need assistance. Charlie Angela is with us live now from Westminster in London. Okay, so Charlie, do we know more about how the United Kingdom is actually going to do this? You have airports across the Gulf that are effectively shuttered. Does the UK have some plan to actually get these people out, and under what circumstances might they sort of emergency evacuate them?
Well, the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has not given too much detail. She said that they're setting up support systems to evacuate those 300,000 British citizens. And that's not just expats, that's also holidaymakers, that's people who've been stranded in transit. Now, we understand one of the options that they're looking at is about reopening regional airspace. Another idea that's been floated is busing Britons across the border into Saudi Arabia, where they could then be flown back to the UK. The government has opened up a site asking people to register their presence in the Gulf region. We understand about 100,000 people have done that so far. And the directive to them now is just to follow those government updates. But they're looking at a wide range of options, hopefully trying to involve the travel industry, getting people out on commercial flights, but if not, preparing for a government-led evacuation. That could be one of the biggest mass evacuations in a generation. But to be clear, it's not underway yet, but planning is definitely underway.
Okay, Charlie, I also want to ask you about the RAF, the Royal Air Force Base in Cyprus, that has also sustained damage. I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it has been hit by a drone. The UK has made clear that they are not joining this conflict, but they did allow that base to be used by the Americans. Do you have any insight into the decision making there from Westminster?
So we know that that base was hit by an unmanned drone overnight. There were no casualties, there was only minimal damage. In fact, the Prime Minister says he doesn't believe that it was being directly targeted. It was just part of Iran's indiscriminate firing in the region, and he's reassured the Cypriot Prime Minister that his country is not being targeted. At the same time, he has changed his thinking and allowed the US to use UK bases. It's not confirmed that they would be using RAF Akrotiri at the moment. The names that have been floated are RAF Fairford, which is here in the UK, about 70 miles from London, and also Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. And that really is, we won't say a U-turn. He's saying that the US has asked for a very specific reason to use those bases for specific limited defensive operations, which could involve targeting Iranian missile depots and launchers. But previously, the UK had said that the US could not use those bases. The UK is stressing it is not involved in a war with Iran. It was not involved in those original offensive attacks, and it does not want to be drawn into it. In fact, it's even published a summary of the legal advice as to why allowing US to use its bases now is lawful under international law. But we're expecting the government's going to be fielding some very difficult questions later today about how it can ensure that the US uses those UK bases specifically for defensive purposes only.
All right, Charlie, Angela, thank you. We've got some new information to bring our viewers. Qatar says it's intercepted 2 Iranian drones targeting its energy facilities. One of them targeted a Qatar energy facility in Ras Laffan. There are no reports of casualties. Let's go to Zain Basravi, who's monitoring things from here in Doha. So, Zain, what more do we know about this?
Well, what we understand from what's coming out of the Qatari government is they say they will assess the damage. So it is unclear exactly what took place, but we do know from their statement that there has been an attack. They were targeted. They say that 2 drones were launched from the Republic of Iran. One targeted a water tank belonging to a power plant in Mesaid. Certainly something very concerning for a city that relies on power to function, to stay cool. Qatar has a population of about 3.2 million people. This is one of the main power plants that were targeted. And another drone targeted an energy facility in the Ras Laffan industrial city belonging to Qatar Energy. Now, it's important we talk about exactly why this is so significant. Ras Laffan is a massive industrial hub. It is home to the world's largest liquid natural gas export facility. And now, liquid natural gas is the lifeblood of the Qatari economy. This is striking directly at the heart of what allows this country to function. This is something that the government is unlikely to take quietly. So this is a very serious escalation. The government once again saying that it will assess the damage in due course, but it is unclear exactly what transpired, but simply targeting this very significant facility. It's about 80 kilometers north of Doha, right on the coast of the Gulf waters. And we also have to say that Iran and Qatar have for so long enjoyed such a close relationship. They share the world's largest natural gas field. And this kind of attack certainly is corroding a relationship that's been built up for years. But the Qatar government saying earlier today that they're currently not engaging with Iran, an attack like this will not help matters.
All right, Rasul Sardar has reported extensively from Iran. He knows the region very well. So, Rasul, look, we've seen now this attack on Qatar's energy facilities. We've seen also evidence of the same in Kuwait and in Saudi Arabia. It seems like this is clearly a strategy. How big a deal is this? How big of a disruption could this be for the global economy?
So Iranians have been quite clear. If Iran is not safe, the region is not safe. No one is safe. And that has been one of the pillars of their deterrence strategy. So simply they build that on two tracks. First, make sure that the USA is going to be well aware of the cost. So raise the cost